Hey friends, it's Scott. I want to take a moment and just thank our sponsor, Tuple. I'm chatting with Johnny Marler from Tuple. Johnny, why do most screen sharing tools suck so much for developers? Like business folks, they love a good Teams call or a Zoom call, but for programmers, it just doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, I think it's, business people are doing something completely different than developers. They'll get on a call and they'll share slides or share a doc and just use it to talk. But, when we're developers, we're actually creating something together. So it's really nice to have that tool that's specifically tailor made for that process. I know if you're a programmer and you've done any pairing, we've all been there where, you're trying to dictate, hey, no, change that function. No, not that line, or you're trying to verbalize a CLI command, is space or dash, or was it forward or backslash? When I'm pairing, I don't know about you, but I need all my brain cells. And I don't want to be wasting them like trying to verbalize that communication. So Tuple just makes all that easy. You get one-click annotation tools. You can share control by default. There's no hidden settings that you have to go through, and there's no like Chrome or like UI that's covering up your IDE. It's just made for programming, and I think once you try Tuple, it's really hard to go back to generic screen sharing tools.
It's really hard to go back. Actually, that is super true. You can check it out at tuple.app. It is the best tailor-made remote pair programming app for both Mac OS and Windows. Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. This is another episode of Hanselminutes. Today I'm chatting with Mike Rousos. He's Principal Software Engineer in Customer Engagement at Microsoft. How's it going?
It's going all right. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Most of our interactions are a little one-sided because you work with customers and then you write up these like epic write-ups and explain what you did. And spending time with the customer is like so important. And I've always complained that like a lot of PMs and engineers at Microsoft don't spend any time with the customer at all. So then like where are they pulling their knowledge from? So how does customer engagement work? You go there or you are assigned to a customer for a period of time because you're not like a consultant, but you are also consulting. So help me understand how that works.
Yeah, it's a pretty unique role. So like you said, I'm part of the customer engagement organization inside of Core AI platform. And it's a customer facing part of the engineering group. So, we're part of the product group, but our role is to interact with customers as they're getting started with new technologies that we're developing. So I focus on .NET. We also have engineers who focus on Java, but for me, that primarily means helping customers get started with new versions of .NET, getting started deploying those applications into Azure PaaS environments, and just anything related to sort of whatever, the product group is working on, making sure that we're on the ground with customers, understanding firsthand what that experience is like. So it is very much like being a consultant, except that, we don't charge anything. We just show up. The way we get paid is in learning. We show up, we help make sure that customers are successful getting started with these products. And then we bring back to the product group, hey, here's where it worked. Here's where it didn't. This is what we need to fix in V next. This is what we need to clarify in documentation. Here are bugs we need to address, whatever. And it's our way of making sure that we get that customer feedback that you're talking about that's so important.
So there was a thing many years ago called MCS, Microsoft Consulting Service. You pay $100 an hour and they come to you and they like are staff augmentation. But you're not that. You're going there and you're learning and they're on the bleeding edge. They're doing daily builds of .NET or you're debugging something obscure in the jitter or the GC. Yes. That sounds like a pretty sweet gig. How would a customer get that though? Like how do they get a free Microsoft guy to show up?
So the way it happens is primarily we work with account teams. So, someone in the account organization who works with these customers day in and day out would come and talk to someone on our end and say, hey, we've got a customer who's got this interesting situation. They're trying to upgrade to .NET 10 and they're running into this, unusual bug, or they want to try this brand new tool that's in private preview or public preview. And then we only have a handful of engineers on my team, so we have to be a little bit selective, but we'll try and identify the ones with the biggest learning opportunity. And we're a little different from MCS because we don't actually do the work for the customer. We may create like prototypes and show them how it would happen, but we're very much more just sort of advisory. But yeah, if the account team comes to us and says, "Hey, we've got this interesting scenario," then if it seems like an opportunity for us to validate something about the product or learn something interesting, we'll jump in. Recently, a lot of that's been related to our tooling around upgrade and migration and stuff, because that's kind of what's been new that we've been working on. But whatever the product group's working on is what we'll look for.
And I like that you're saying that you're picking it because the problem is interesting.
Yeah,
Like, that sounds hard. Let's go over there. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
The last big write-up that you wrote was really cool because it was a big company that would recognize the name of, that was migrating dozens of web apps
Mhm.
that were both on .NET Core, which is now 10 versions old, also .NET Framework, which is 15, 20 years old.
Yep.
And they were on premises. Like, it's 2025 and they're running on bare metal.
Yeah.
They wanted to move it into the cloud. So that's like a triple migration, in the sense of, it's like they want to get to the latest .NET, they want to get off of Metal, they want to make sure that they're using the latest modernization. That's not something you can vibe. You can't just tell GitHub Copilot,
No,
go
we've
do that.
tried. but yeah, that's it's a lot of work, and you're exactly right that they needed to modernize in multiple different ways, right? Because when customers come to us and say, "Hey, we need to migrate," the first conversation is, "Well, what do you mean by that?" Because sometimes it means, "Hey, we got this stuff on .NET 5, we need to go to .NET 9." Sometimes it's .NET Framework, .NET Framework 4.8 or .NET Framework 3.5 coming up to either, .NET Framework 4.8.1 or up to .NET 9. Sometimes it's moving into Azure. It's like, "Hey, we're on premise, we want to get into Azure App Service." Sometimes it's refactoring. We've got this giant monolith, we need to be more service oriented. And yeah, in this case, this particular customer, it was kind of a little bit of all of that. So we really had to kind of break it down and tackle it a piece at a time.
Why do they upgrade? Like, this might be a dumb question, but like, why not just leave it? It works fine.
So it's actually a really good question, and actually there have been times when I've told customers, maybe you don't need to upgrade everything all at once right away, but there are benefits to upgrading, right? Like, and again, depending on what we mean by upgrade, the upgrading to the latest version of .NET is, that one's primarily going to be about performance, about supportability, about cross-plat support. If a lot of times, so this customer we're just working with, they had stuff targeting .NET 5. That's an easy upgrade because .NET 5 is out of support. Like, yep, you got to get up to .NET 8 or 9 if you want to be in support. Coming from framework, .NET Framework 4.8 is in support, will be, indefinitely. So there's no supportability reason you have to upgrade. But if you have a project that's undergoing active development, there's a lot of benefits to getting onto .NET 9. Obviously, huge performance wins. You get the opportunity of running cross-platform if that's useful. You get access to the latest, language and runtime features. The ecosystem is continually evolving. A lot of NuGet packages now don't even support .NET Framework. So if you want to take advantage of all of that, you need to be on .NET 9. I've even heard customers say they want to upgrade just because it makes it easier to hire developers. If they go out and say, "Hey, we want you to come work on this .NET Framework 3.5 web forms thing," it's like, yeah, crickets, no one applies. But if it's, "Hey, this is .NET 9, this is Blazor," it's like, cool. Now people want to do it. So, there's a lot of benefits there. If you've got an app that, man, it's just doing its thing and you don't ever touch it, then Framework's all right. But for stuff that you're working on day in and day out, like, there's a lot of benefits to
Yeah.
being modern.
Yeah. Getting it into the cloud is one kind of an upgrade, right? Just simply
Yes.
moving it off of some spinning Rust hard drive. Like, I
Yeah.
did that to my blog many years ago. It was running on .NET 4 and then 4.8, but it was running in a Windows VM on an unsupported version of Windows Server. And it's just a blog. Like, why am I managing a virtual machine
Yep.
and letting it reboot and run Windows Update when I could just throw it into something like app service or an app service environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so that migration into Azure is sort of that other type of modernization we were talking about. And that one, it really is all about where the costs are, where the risk is. Because yeah, if you've got this VM that you were running your blog on, you have to keep that up to date. You have to patch Windows. You have to worry about all of that maintenance of the server. Whereas you go into app service, that's taken care of for you. All you have to do is, focus on the thing you want to do, which is create the blog. And so yeah, the customer that you were talking about that we were working with most recently, that was their motivation. They had worked with our account team to understand the cost benefits of being in Azure PaaS and not having to worry about maintaining this data center, not need to worry about all of that maintenance work that now becomes Azure's responsibility. And so they had this effort, like you said, to migrate quite a large number of apps in order to take advantage of Azure Platform as a Service offerings. In this case, it was app service environment.
Yeah. And on the perf side, you've done a lot of really interesting perf stuff where you've even brought in like the .NET team or
Oh
like
yeah.
Mayoni who worked on the GC and like
Mhm.
debug stuff. When you say there's a perf improvement from going to like .NET Framework 4X to 9 or 10, .NET 9 or 10, it really can't be over. Like I'm not trying to like oversell it, but like it's crazy fast. Like even going like 5.6, 5 to 8, 8 to 10. We've all read the Stephen Tobe, like it's the Stephen Tobe giant, like super long blog, but like ballpark it for me here. If you just moved some nice clean razor pages from 4 over to 9 or 10, how many improvements are you getting in performance and what kind of a bump are you going to see?
That's hard to say. It really depends on the scenario. It will typically be noticeable. I'll say that. I mean, the
Mm,
details are going to depend from scenario to scenario. And I will also say that when we work with customers, we tell them it's not only upgrading to, .NET 8 or 9 or 10, but it's also profiling, understanding where your bottlenecks are, because I have had scenarios where customers have upgraded from, .NET Framework 4, 5 or whatever to .NET 9. And then they come back and say, it's the same speed. We go and we look, it's like, well, it's because you've got this bottleneck in your code.
right. It's the
You
same. It's the
know,
same bad SQL query
yeah,
or whatever.
exactly.
Like
Yeah, you've got this SQL query that takes
yeah,
forever.
yeah. Network latency is a thing, and you can't change
Yeah.
that.
The way I explain it to customers is that when you upgrade to .NET Core, especially something modern like 9 or 10, the ceiling for what performance is possible goes way up. Now it's a question of, is your code set up to take advantage of that? But you've got all sorts of tools now in Visual Studio to easily profile that and help you identify where those issues are. And once you address them, then yes, you do get those wins that I don't know what the number would be, but it's you will notice it and say,
You
wow,
will
this is
notice it.
this
Yeah.
is this is better.
You will notice it in all caps.
Yeah.
Like it starts up faster, it compiles
Yes.
faster, it deploys faster. The way I've tried to explain it to someone is that it feels lighter weight.
Yeah.
Like being able to go from this 30 gig Windows VM that ran my blog to spinning it up in a Docker container on a Raspberry Pi
Mhm.
just made me realize that like, wow, this is actually a nice little app that I've got here. I'm
Yeah.
glad I put the work into moving it to the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Now, we're not going to mention this company's name, and I don't want to test shame them, but they had 50 plus apps that they were migrating, and
Yep.
only one of them had automated tests.
One had tests. Yep. That was one
That's
of the
that's
big
not cool, man.
problems that upgrade these apps and then go to try and validate that they were working. And the other thing that complicated it was oftentimes the people who own the applications don't have time to do these upgrades. So you end up with a central like operations or IT or cloud, best practice team or someone owning these sorts of upgrades. And now this person who's never seen the app before is responsible for making sure that it works on .NET 8, that it works in Azure, and they don't even know what the app's supposed to do. So one of the challenges we often help people with is to understand, hey, you got to make sure you've got a way of validating that this is good. If you don't have tests up front, hey, record some stuff with Playwright, use GitHub Copilot, generate some tests, something so that once you're done with this work, you can go back and say, okay, yes, it's functioning the way it's supposed to, because the modernization itself is one chunk of time, but then often the validation of the app takes just as long. And so if
Yeah.
you can do things to help with that, it's obviously accelerates the whole process.
I've always talked about fear-driven development, FDD, which is
Yeah.
like if there's a part of the code you're really afraid of, like for me, for like Hanselman, it's Hanselman.com, the blog,
Yeah.
Azure Friday, it's the routing. Like the
Hmm.
routing is the thing because I have like probably 40 custom routes
Mhm.
for little stuff that you don't think about because you Google, you hit my blog, you go, hey, the RSS feed, the response types, the MIME types that get returned. I need to make sure that all the URLs work. I've got really sophisticated routing. I've even got an old IIS, what's it? IIS
Oh
rewrite.xml.
yeah, yeah.
and I'm using the middleware for that, right? So I've got a 20-year-old XML file to do regular expression level routing, and I'm afraid of it. So when I migrated, before I did the migration, I wrote like 20 tests about the parts that I was the most afraid of. Yeah. And those now are the things that make me feel better. So like start with the hot path. But for me, I start with the fear. Like, what am I going to break? Write a test around it. And you keep writing tests until you're not afraid anymore.
Yep. I love that. That's a great way to do it, to say, hey, what's the thing that's going to keep me up at night? Get the tests in there. And that IIS rewriting you talked about, I don't know exactly how you did it, but I know that some parts of, our IIS, redirect and rewrite functionality is different in app service. And that's one that customers run into every now and then. I had a customer who took their app. They thought, oh, well, app service is just like IIS. So I'm just going to pick my app up. I want to make this super lightweight and easy. So I'm not going to, change the .NET target. I'm just picking up, dropping an app service. Boom, 500 when they went to the website and we looked into it. And there was a few things like that where, a certain IIS module isn't enabled by default for the rewriting or whatever it was. And they had to set a few options, set a few settings, and we managed to get things working without too much trouble. But yeah, that's the sort of thing that every now and then you run into. So if you've got those tests and say, hey, I need to try hit this path and make sure that it resolves correctly, that's how you know that you're not running into something like that.
There's all these little assumptions that we made, and then they'll bump. You'll hit them. Like one of the ones I hit was forward slashes versus backslashes.
Oh yeah,
right. Like this is a harmless little text file. It'll be fine. Hard coded.
So you go to a Raspberry Pi.
Yep, and then system.directory.io.path separator, and the next thing you know, or I had time zones where we were loading time zones out of the registry, and registries don't exist on Linux, and then you're off and running.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, the time zone stuff's all managed by the operating system. And so it's gonna be a little different.
Hey friends, this is Scott. I want to thank our new sponsor, CodeRabbit. We are shipping more code than ever, and that means there's more code reviews than ever. So that must mean that all these code reviews are going to slow me down. Is that right, Aravind?
Not exactly, Scott. That's where we also come in. CodeRabbit exactly cuts your code review time into half and your bugs into half. We give you the feedback right in your PR context and helping your developers move faster while they are also generating code more faster. We offer one-click fixes and spot all the bugs and refactor issues, deliver it on your own Git workflow, and help you move really faster in the AI era.
CodeRabbit offers free AI code reviews directly in your code editor. Fix those bugs, find those defects, especially the ones that were introduced by Vibe Coding, and it all does it without breaking your flow state. So you will be able to ship more code than ever. I encourage you to check it out at coderabbit.ai and sign up for a free trial now. So these are all examples of stuff that you know because you've been doing this for so long. Like this is stuff you know because you're an expert. Here's the question though, where does AI fit into this? Like, I don't think AI is going to replace 30 years of knowledge, but it does do a lot of tedious stuff. And so help me understand where expertise fits and where GitHub Copilot modernization fits.
Yeah, for sure. Because we do have GitHub Copilot based tools now that help with these experiences. Just about a week ago, we GA'd the GitHub Copilot app modernization tool, which is part of Visual Studio. And for your .NET apps, it will help you upgrade between versions of .NET, help you get them ready to run in Azure. But it is sort of an interaction between, GitHub Copilot and, documentation, guidance, static analysis tools can help spot these sorts of things. We have an older tool called Azure Migrate Application and Code Assessment, which is just a static analysis tool, but it'll go through your whole solution. It'll find all of the .NET APIs you're calling that might behave differently in an Azure PaaS environment and put them in a list, in a report. So you can go look at it and be like, is this going to matter? Do I need to change anything? And it helps you not have those blind spots. I think the place where GitHub Copilot really helps is sort of after that initial analysis happens, like after you've already sort of done the scan to say, okay, where might there be problems? Copilot's really good at helping you understand things. It can take a big report and
Mm.
say, here are the things that really matter. Or if you're not sure what to do about something, GitHub Copilot can help you figure out what the right next steps are. So whether that's just going into chat in VS Code or Visual Studio and asking Copilot, hey, this report says that I'm, using the registry, and that's not going to work when I'm running in Azure Container Apps. What should I do?
Mhm.
GitHub Copilot's really great at coming up with alternatives, helping you brainstorm. And then also this tooling that we have now, it's brand new. Some portions that are still in preview, but being able to have a tool that can use a knowledge base that's provided via a built-in MCP server and use that knowledge base to understand how some of these transformations have to happen. Well, then it can take that code, do some of the transformation for you, and get you ready to, do whatever it is you need to do in the new world.
That's a great point. I think that a lot of people think that LLM based migration is copy pasting 10,000 lines into a thing and like figure it out. But there's a programmatic aspect to it. There's tools, there's MCP servers. There was a really solid migration experience long before AI was a thing. Most of my migrations were done with the actual, .NET Migrate command line tool.
Yeah.
That still exists, right? So like putting the LLM around the edge cases is helpful, but it's going to be calling into actual tools, Roslyn analyzers that know how to do stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Was that the tool that it was sort of on the command line? You'd give it a .NET Framework project and
Yeah,
it would
there was
transform your CS
exactly. There was a
prompt.
command line one that was kind of it'd update your CS proj,
Yeah.
and then it moved into Visual Studio, and they gave it a visual thing, and then now the one in Visual Studio has a prompt, and I think that there's tools and tooling wrapped around that.
Yeah, and that's the direction we're going, is to have Copilot sort of be part of the process. Not that it does everything, but that it orchestrates, it fills in gaps. I asked which tool it was because I think that was a tool that our team created actually
Oh
as
yeah.
an output from a customer
Oh,
engagement.
thank you for that.
Yeah, quite a few years ago, we were working with the customer and they actually created a framework that made it easy to generate, a certain style of web app. And customers would like use their things that they could easily create their CMS app or whatever it was. And they were in a situation where they wanted to upgrade their framework to .NET Core. They also hosted apps for customers sometimes. They wanted to start hosting these apps on Linux. So they said, hey, we need our customers to upgrade from ASP.NET to ASP.NET Core, but that's a difficult upgrade. And we have hundreds of customers. How can we get our customers upgrade more quickly? And so our team actually started prototyping with them. Hey, let's see what we can do programmatically here. And we came up with the first version of the .NET Upgrade Assistant, which at this point's been through like multiple rebirths, but that was kind of its beginning. And they were able to get their customers more quickly upgraded, which meant they could then upgrade their own product. But so just a fun little connection there. But yeah, as you said, it's still available as a command line tool today, but now we've got the GitHub Copilot app modernization tool, which eventually will sort of fill that same gap, through that combination of, hey, we've got rules about how to transform a CS proj to SDK style. We've got a knowledge base that tells us how to do this, but then we've also got the power of the LLM fitting it all together. The LLM's able to, intelligently react when something unexpected happens, when we get a build error, we get something doesn't restore from NuGet, the LLM's able to jump in.
You just said something I think is really important. You said unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And this is the thing I think people don't realize, is that I think I'm starting to realize it, and it is that LLMs deal with ambiguity.
Yes.
But if it's deterministic, it needs to stay deterministic. So there are things like what you need to do to upgrade a CS proj, what you need to do to make your startup.cs work correctly. These aren't opinions; they are best practices, right? But then everybody's got some edge case. Everybody's got something ambiguous, and that's where the LLM adds value. So I think it's the mix of a proper migration tool that's like hardened, for lack of a better word, based on experience. And then they're like, oh, this is weird.
Yes.
Send that
Exactly.
to the LLM.
And there's always something weird. For the longest time, before we had, Copilot, we were trying to do the best we could with these static tools. And they were okay. They got you, 80% of the way there or whatever. But there's always something unusual. It doesn't like guaranteed. You sit down with a customer, you try to modernize their app, you're going to hit something weird. Maybe I worked with a customer who had created this whole plugin model using system.addin, which doesn't exist in .NET Core. Well, you don't see that very often, but it's out there. I've got another customer who had this fancy remoting setup. There's always there's someone I work with at Microsoft, one of my colleagues. She had a great expression for this. She said, helping customers and partners modernize apps is like a herd of unicorns. There's a ton of them, but they're each individual. And man, that's the best way to describe it, because that really is how it is. But yeah, that's where Copilot can help. It's, hey, we've got this tool that's going to do the 75% that's all the same. We know how to do this. Now for this last quarter, let's have the LLM use its intelligence to, maybe fix some things, maybe just point you in the right direction, maybe just be a sounding board so that you can go and have a good brainstorming conversation as you figure out the right path forward.
Yeah, but the LLMs are not going to solve bad infrastructure. They're not going to solve a lousy application experience where if you can't even build the thing reliably.
Yeah.
I imagine that if they don't have a build server, then that's going to be a challenge. If they don't have any tests, that's going to be a challenge. Yep. I don't think you'd want to YOLO or vibe migrate something.
Well, no, but what you would do is you would YOLO or vibe a part of it. Let's say you've got an app that, like this customer we were talking about at the beginning of the show, where they've got no tests, they've got 50 apps, 100 apps, whatever. Maybe the place you start is you say, hey, Copilot, write some documentation for me about how these projects work, because they're not well documented. Okay, cool. We spend a day doing that. Day 2, Copilot, use these documents as input. Now help me create a good set of unit tests or some integration tests that are going to validate that these work. Cool. Okay, now that part's done. And you sort of incrementally walk through this process. Not that you just tell Copilot, hey, here's 100,000 lines of code. It's got to run in Azure this afternoon. But you break it down, and Copilot helps with each piece along the way. And that's where you really get the benefits of the LLMs, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. People try to do what's called a one shot.
Yeah.
And then they find it wanting, and they're like, well, this is just an eager, energetic intern that is just going to mess everything up.
For sure.
But say, make me a plan, look at the plan, validate the plan with knowledge, execute on the plan, and go from there. I think also, though, that if you're at a company like this big one that we talk about that has 50 different projects, they might have unique things that are shared amongst the 50 projects.
Absolutely.
Can I then go into Copilot and say, hey, I'm here at company X, and they all do this weird thing. Here's some custom instructions that I want you to think about during the migration.
Yeah, absolutely. That's GitHub Copilot Chat does have the ability to accept instructions files that describe how it needs to solve a particular problem. Mm-hmm. That's where you could put something like that. Or even with our tooling, the tooling has the ability to accept additional instructions files that guide, or even learn from what you do. One of the cool things that the app modernization tool does is sometimes it'll get stuck. It'll try to fix a build error 3 or 4 times, and then it pauses and asks the developer to help. After the developer addresses the issue, the app modernization tool looks at the diff to see how the developer solved it. And then we store that locally in your .vs folder so that later on in that same solution, if we hit a similar problem, Copilot can say, oh, wait, this is like that one that I had to ask for help for 2 hours ago. Let me see how they fixed it. And so, yeah, I think that in general, as you're working through these things, having the ability to tell Copilot, here in our organization, we have this pattern. This is what you need to do about it is super valuable. Even things that aren't that specific to particular customers. One of the things I've learned using GitHub Copilot myself is that it always wants to use the latest and greatest tools. So if I'm working with an old .NET Framework app, trying to get it to run an app service, it's going to try to do things like, I'm calling .NET Build to build it. Well, .NET Build isn't going to work with an ASP.NET MVC app. And so I have instructions files that I've collected that I just drop in and say, okay, this is my instructions file for when I'm working with .NET Framework to remind Copilot, this is a targeting an older version of .NET. You need to use MS Build. When you install NuGet packages, this is what that looks like. Don't just assume you can add a package reference because we're still using packages config. And yeah, so having the ability to guide the LLM is pretty key.
You developed a thing, I think, called X to Y dependency transformation.
Yeah, that was something our team came up with. Yeah, so that's one of the engineers on my team, Manfred, came up with that originally, and we've all sort of adopted it. Mm-hmm. What we discovered is that there are certain patterns of prompts that work well for Copilot. Copilot responds well to having a lot of structure in its prompts. It responds very well to having a detailed task list of steps it needs to walk through, like having like a to-do.md or a progress.md. So we found these best practices that made Copilot effective at code transformation. So what the X to Y transformation is it's really just a codification of that, where we have a template that has all of these sorts of best practices embedded in it. So then when you want to transform your code, let's say you've got a problem, you need to update your code to log with library Y instead of library X. Oh, instead of just saying to Copilot, please update my code to use library Y instead of library X, what you do is you tell Copilot, use this template that has a lot of best practices in it to create a prompt that won't move my code from X to Y. Make sure you follow this template that has all of these best practices in it. And so Copilot now makes you the prompt. Copilot doesn't make the change. Copilot makes the prompt. Then in a new session, you have Copilot execute that prompt, and it's got all these best practices, like, hey, it's got to use this task list. It has clear success criteria defined. All of these things that we've learned over the past, year or two that make Copilot effective get put into that prompt so that it just works a lot more effectively than you just running in and, like you said, just one-shotting it, saying, hey, get rid of X, put in Y. Like, yeah, it might work. But if you use this sort of two-phase approach, it works better in our experience.
Now, we've heard people say 10x more productive, and other people have been like, no, I'm not more productive at all. It seems like it's very wildly ranging. Like,
Yes.
I feel when I'm doing it, I'm probably 25 to 50% more productive.
Sure.
But then, like right now, I'm not coding, so like I'm not more productive. Like a lot of people don't code full on hands-on keyboard 40 hours a week.
Yep.
I maybe get, I don't know, 12 hours a week I'm actually coding.
Yeah.
So an extra 50%, that's great. That's giving me like a whole half a day. What are you hearing, like anecdotally, from folks about whether or not they're faster in migrating with Copilot?
It really depends on the customer, because it varies. But yeah, generally customers are telling me that they're 25% faster or whatever it is. It does depend on the kind of work they're doing. One of the things I saw recently with a customer was that it was the senior developers who were telling me these 25, 50% numbers. And the junior developers were like, nah, it didn't make me faster. And when we dig in, I think there's a few factors that go into that. First of all, one junior developer told me, I don't use Copilot because I don't know what to ask it. I said, well, that's interesting. Like you sort of have to know enough about your problem space to know how something like GitHub Copilot Chat's going to help you. But also it depends on the kind of work you're doing. If you're doing, I think Copilot always can be involved, but how much it's going to help depends on what it is that you're working on. If you're debugging something, yeah, you'll bounce some ideas off of it. It helps a little bit, but maybe the savings is more limited. If you're generating a lot of code that, you can describe how it's supposed to work, you can give a nice, spec for it. Hey, Copilot can go off and it can do a whole day's worth of work in 20 minutes if it's the right kind of work.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And the thing that you said that resonates the most, and I think Mark Rusinovich and I have a paper coming out on this, is that if you're junior and you don't even know what to ask, that's a really tough spot to be in. So while we're having all these conversations about what it means for AI for the software engineering like discipline, we need to be thinking about how to bring early in career people in, because the qualifications right now for migrating 20-year-old code is be an old programmer.
Yeah.
And that's not very fair to everybody,
It's not.
Like, how do you know that? Well, back in the early days, like that's not. Right. So how do we use AI to augment the knowledge of the early in career person? Because I'd love to have a 25-year-old or someone who's got 5 years experience go on a customer engagement with you and have success, but also have the AI teach them and accelerate their learning. And that I think is a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, that's a challenge. Let me know when that paper's ready. I'd love to read it, because it's something I don't know that I have an answer to, but I'm sure as AI improves, it'll be better able to help people understand its capabilities, what they need to know. But yeah, it's a hard problem that I think we're going to have to iterate on until we figure out a good path forward.
Well, I think it all comes down to exposure. Like you can't be successful unless you get exposed to these things. So you as a customer engagement person are getting to spend time with customers. So you know more than, you and your team know more than anybody what it's like out there in the real world. I still remember what it was like to not work for Microsoft. So I have so much empathy when I go into a customer and I like, oh man, I know what this code looks like, and I know how it happened, and I know all the office politics that got us here.
yeah, you've been there. You know how you end up with that sort of a solution, and
yeah, it's got to be very satisfying to get it in production, and a lot of those apps that you did in this engagement are in production now.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we love to see is just sort of the crossing the finish line, getting something running in Azure, running on .NET 10, or if it's a perf question, seeing that 2x perf gain or whatever it is to say like, wow, yeah, that's hey, there's real value there, and that's always how software development is, though. When you run your app and you actually see it do the thing that it's supposed to do, it's that's the time when you love this job.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Mike Rousos, for hanging out with me today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Scott.
This has been another episode of Hanselminutes, and we'll see you again next week.